All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. My name's Matt, and today I'm joined by Chris Walsh, who is the COO and co-founder of LifeScore, as well as the founder of something interesting, which we call Women of Winter. Is that right? Chris, how are you today?
That's right, Matt. Good. I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much for joining us. Chris, where are you coming from today?
I live in Bozeman, Montana. For those of you big skiers, that's near Big Sky.
Big Sky in Montana. Okay, it sounds wonderful. And you are on the west coast of the United States?
West coast of the United States, west coast of Montana, west border of Montana.
Fantastic. So, Chris, what we're going to do today, I'd like to speak to you a little bit about some of the projects that you're working on. I'd like to speak to you about how you got there, a little bit about your journey, and then touch on some of the companies that you've been involved in and are currently involved in. So, if we start at the beginning, let's go right to the start, to your education, if you don't mind. Can you talk us through your universities? I see you've got a couple of degrees, a few qualifications. It's quite an impressive list.
Yeah, I think I am a little bit of a massive, if you can't tell, I'm like a massive bibliophile. I also have, this is a thing that I do now because I realize I have a very bad discipline of this. I don't know if everyone else does, but I scroll a lot when I go to the bathroom. So I've got books in every place where I might potentially scroll. So I think that kind of bleeds through to everything I do. And so, back to school. I went to New York University for undergrad. I did econ and computer science. And then from there, I went to the University of Texas at Austin in the McCombs School of Business and got a master's of science in science and tech commercialization. At that point, I was 22, and I took a 1-year sort of gap to go visit my dad's family in Austria for a year, which is actually when I learned to ski when I was 22. And then from there, I took the LSAT at Oktoberfest in Munich, somehow got into law school and ended up back in New York and went to law school out there.
A lot of things going on over there. And that 1-year break has led on to something which we'll get into later. You've accomplished, by the time you finished, you'd accomplished quite a lot. Tell me, what was your idea going through all of this? Did you know where you were going, or did you just say, you know what, I like studying, I like learning, just bring it on? Was there a path that you chose?
Yeah, I've talked about this a lot because I think it can impact a lot of people. I think it impacts folks, especially from how I grew up. I'm a first-generation immigrant. My grandparents, my mom, they're all from the Philippines. They immigrated over during the sugarcane rush to Hawaii. And so they came from a very scarcity mindset, right? They didn't have a lot. My grandfather didn't live with my mom and my grandma for years until he had enough money to bring them over. And so for them, they had really big aspirations for what my life should look like. And I think as a young person, I was very goal-oriented, wanted to make folks happy, especially folks that invested in me. And there were a lot of people that invested in me between my parents and my coaches and my teachers. And you want, there's an internal drive. I think we all feel that, to make folks proud. And it's really nice also to achieve goals and check boxes. And so I think growing up, I didn't really have a great sense of a North Star. Unfortunately, I'm always jealous of people that I've met who are just from day one, they wanted to be a doctor. From day one, they wanted to be a singer, and they've dedicated their whole lives and thousands and thousands of hours to those things. And so unfortunately for me, and, fortunately, unfortunately, I didn't do that. I kind of kept going down a path where it was really easy to keep feeling like I was winning. Okay, you get good grades, you win. As long as I don't go into the real world, this is kind of a great path. And so while I think I love education, I think I also wasn't really well equipped to figure out what I wanted to do in my life. And so, later on when I left the law firm, that was a big sort of hurdle I had to really tackle for the first time.
Getting into the real world, you mean? That was
or figuring out what I was going to do. I think I didn't have a true passion. I was good. I think this is one thing that I talk a lot to students or people coming up about. It's just because you're good at something doesn't necessarily mean you should do something. And it's really hard to figure that out when you're good at things. Because people are like, and you can see it at work, right? If you're really good at something, everyone will be like, oh, you're really good at that. Could you do that for me? And it's like finding those places of like, it's in this book that I read where it's like zones that you kind of live in. So there's like zone of incompetence. You should probably never operate there. It's pretty bad. Zone of competence where you're like, oh, okay, maybe I can like offload that. And then like the most dangerous zone is like the zone of greatness, because you're really good at it. And people are like, you're really good at it. I should give you those things. And you like that. People feed off of that affirmation, but really you're discounting yourself to achieve your zone of genius, where that's where only you can play, where you're the best at it, where you're the one should be doing that work. And so a lot of us, I think, play in our zone of greatness because it's really comfortable and it feels really good. And so identifying and being willing to say no to things in order to achieve like areas or play in areas that are your zone of genius is really, really hard. So that's where I lived for a really long time, was in like my zone of greatness, until I realized like I'm a very like intention-driven person and purpose-driven person. It's really hard for me to just do things because just because I have to really like want to do it. So for a long time it was learning, right? But once I got into like a real job, that intention of what I was doing, I didn't have it. And so I was really, really hungry and kind of just like a bucking horse trying to figure out what am I meant to do? What is like my own zone of genius to play in?
I like that. I must say that was very insightful, and also I like the way you slipped in that last zone, and you caught me off guard. I won't lie. The first zone, the second zone, the zone of greatness, I thought, oh yeah, that's cool. I like that. The feedback, the interaction with the people. I recognize what you're saying. When you're good at something, people force it onto you, and you can get stuck in that, can't you? Because of that feedback, that give and take, and you're in that zone. And then you brought out that last one, zone of genius, and I thought, wow, that's where I want to be.
That's your flow state. I always say like, that's your flow state. No one else can do that job, and you feel like that's where no one else can do that job. There's like, I have a couple of things where I feel like that's really where I excel. Personally, internally, I excel, and then I can deliver the best also for others.
Very cool. I like it. And so let's progress a little bit. We're talking about the universities. You teach a class at the moment at called Start Something at Montana State. Is that right? Yeah,
that's right. I teach yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was saying these things that we're talking about now, this is the stuff you were saying you talk to your students about. How do your classes work? What is your goal for these people? Where are you trying to take them?
Yeah, so I teach at the computer science school. I don't teach in the business school for like a particular reason. I think that there's a lot of really talented people who are the doers. And it's really easy for someone who is sort of a creative or a salesperson to kind of come in and be the one to like stand out, and the doers, like the actual engineers, to kind of stand back and be like, no, I'm not a salesperson. I'm not the person who can be the front of something. And for me, like I'm really drawn to people that can create, and I want to make sure that they feel equipped to be able to get out there and, break out of their shell or their own hindrances of saying, I'm only good at this. It's like, that's not true. You obviously created something out of nothing, whether it's code, whether it's a machine learning model, whatever you did, you created something out of nothing. So that means you're fully capable of taking that and bringing that larger scale. So I teach at the computer science school, computer science students, and it's called Start Something. And the idea is like, they don't necessarily have to start a company, but it's like, you have to just start the habit of being willing to try something, being willing to talk to people about trying something, being willing to like exercise the muscles of like, okay, if I start this, like I should look at who wants it and what are they going to want for it, and what's the, the desirability, the viability, the feasibility of that, and just like stress test it. Even if it's like you just want to start a tutoring program at a school, or you actually want to start a company, you kind of have to flex those muscles of starting something, whatever it may be. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really hard to just kind of, jumpstart it from nothing. I always tell like my teams, you only perform as well in a game as your best practice. Like, don't ever assume that you will ever perform in a game better than your best practice. So you kind of always have to practice and flex once you're like in that game time position. If someone's like in an elevator with you, or it's your time to shine in front of somebody, you know, you have to practice and flex those muscles. So just starting little things, no matter what they are, I think it's really important. And they think not a lot of people do that, or they're really afraid to, or they're afraid of like mistakes or if it fails. And it's kind of like just pushing past all of that and being willing to build that habit.
If I can try and summarize that maybe, or not summarize it, but you know the expression, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You're pushing us onto that first step. You're saying, come on, you have to take it. You have to get started. You have to do this. Or not have to, but you should do. You want to get there. Come on, here we go. Let's get it started.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And we give them frameworks for like how to practice this stuff. So, you know, I'm a big fan of IDEO and their books, Creative Confidence and Design Thinking, and how you design for human experiences or human-centered design. And that's a great way to think about problems you want to solve. And so giving them frameworks. And so every class, you know, we kind of are doing something new. How to speak to a customer or user and really get from them what they want so that you can design for it. We bring in folks that are great storytellers, because if you can't convey like what you're trying to do, it's really, really hard, right? I think you really want a good storyteller. I bring in folks that have like really inspirational stories as well, to kind of give them the sense of like, oh, wow, I did. One of our speakers, or one of the speakers for me who comes in, is one of my co-founders, Tom Gruber. He was the co-inventor of Siri, and he'll tell his stories of like his past failed, you know, tries and tribulations. And so it doesn't feel like, oh, wow, just because someone, you know, is great or has like this huge name doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't have a lot of setbacks along the way. And so it's just kind of giving them a framework to go through that process. And at the very end, they do a pitch. And so it's really fun to see that happen. But we do kind of give them a structure for how to go from nothing to like a little bit of something.
That's very cool. I like it. Let's move through the classes. And so you're doing that at the moment. You're also the COO and co-founder of LifeScore.
Yeah.
LifeScore. And then on top of that, the founder of Women of Winter. But let's start with LifeScore.
Yeah.
You're running all these three things together. Do you struggle to juggle, or do you manage okay?
Yeah. I think it's like there's a couple answers to this. One, I don't do everything. I have great teams that support me. There's literally no way I could do 10% of what I do unless I had like a really strong team that I felt I could delegate to, that I think is really, really going to be able to drive the ship forward. So Women of Winter, we have a really strong volunteer team. At LifeScore, we have a really fantastic team. I'm really into the hiring process. I think for me, companies need to operate like teams. I've been on teams my whole life. And so for me, you know, you really want folks that are A-team players that are willing to step up and be that person and jump into the game and have that mentality and that attitude, especially in a startup. So I still interview every single hire in the company, no matter what. And then, you know, at MSU,
sorry, can I interject? Every single what?
Every hire. I will be a part of the interview process for every hire, because we're only 30 people, so it's a very small company in the sense of like one thing can, you know, really take things a different direction. And so I'm very protective of how that culture of the company is, and making sure that my team is operating at their best, because that helps me operate kind of at my best. And then MSU, thankfully, is just, you know, a quiet little 1-credit class, so I don't have to go too crazy. But again, like, it's because of teams that I have that support me. I definitely don't do everything. I feel like when someone asks people that question and then they give some crazy canned answer, I'm like, absolute liar. Everyone has 24 hours in the day. The difference between some of us and others is some people have help. I think you have to back up a little bit in terms of, people talk about work-life balance, all that stuff. My life might sound really crazy to some people. That for me is my choice. That's my life by design. And that's a real privilege to get to say now. Before, I didn't have a choice of my life by design. When I was at the law firm, my life was by their design. And, you know, for me, I have certain values that are really important now. When I left the firm, I really wanted the value of freedom. And that means to be able to choose to do what I want to do. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm like lollygagging all the time. I probably work more than I've ever worked at the firm, but I get to choose that. And that's a difference. Being able to see my family was a really big one, and having the time to be able to do that. And then being able to kind of ski, that was a big one for me. So those are like the three filters I make decisions in. And so, you know, I get up really early, I work really late, but again, that's because I choose that in order to be able to do all the other things that are really, really important to me. I'll go on vacation to Hawaii and see my family because they live there, but I'll work the whole time. Like I'll get up at 3 and then work for about, 10 hours. And people think that's so insane. And I'm like, yeah, but I get to be for 3 weeks in Hawaii and see my family. So again, it's like life by design. You kind of have to pick and choose like what's important to you.
Absolutely. And that makes a massive difference. And I'm glad that you brought that up. So choosing to work hard it's a pleasure. Knowing that it's up to you. You get up every day, you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it. When we talk about work-life balance, a lot of people will say you need 8 hours for this, 8 hours for that, 8 hours for that. But it's not always an equal balance, is it? There's a mental balance that comes in, and it's with the satisfaction that you bring yourself.
Yeah. And I think you've got to flex, right? Like life has so many ups and downs. Like, my mom's brother had like a tragic accident and I had to be home for a really long time. And thankfully I could do that because of the way, my life's pretty flexible and where I work, but I still have to put in the time to make sure things get done. And so I think that happens for other people, right? You have children or you have something happen where you're like, actually, I need to have a little more time here. So like the balance is tough because it's really a flex. Like it's a flex of what's going on at that moment in your life. It's not linear. It's not on a weighted scale. And I think that's a true privilege to be able to do that. A lot of us don't have that. Like the infrastructure and the systems of how things operate today, they don't allow for that. There's like some changes with remote work, which is great, but it's not how we're like necessarily built as a society.
Absolutely. I heard something interesting once, and you can tell me your thoughts on this. We were talking about struggling, and I can't remember who said it to me. It might have been in a movie. It might have been one of my family members. But they said that you can borrow time or borrow energy from the future. And that's something that has always worked for me. When times are tough and I feel like, it's been a lot of work, things are getting a bit crazy. And I go, where am I going with this? What am I getting out of this?
Yeah.
Right. This is what it is. So I take a little bit of that energy, that reward, even though I haven't got it yet. I know it's coming. So I borrow a little bit of that reward energy. And I use that to just give myself a little boost, to make it to the end. And tell me a little bit about Life Score. I spent a bit of time on the internet, and I was listening to some of the music. It's a very interesting concept. How did this come about? How did you get involved? I believe it was a conversation. It was just a little sketch. In a cafe. What happened there? Yeah.
So it's kind of like a long story short, like TLDR of it. I had just left the law firm. I was a senior associate, and I, like I said, I was really hungry for figuring out what I'm supposed to do in this like space and time of that, where I was. And it took me, I was so entrenched in my world. I had no time to even like conceptualize what could be a possible journey for me. And so instead I interviewed at a ton of other places thinking, okay, maybe if I do here, and it just didn't work out. So at the time I was really lucky and I was able to just check out for 6 months. I bought a trailer, traveled to every ski town I thought I wanted to live in because I really wanted to be in a ski town. I wanted to ski. That was a big thing for me. And after about 6 months, I ended up in Bozeman, Montana. And when I got here, I had no job except that I knew I could ski. So I had taught skiing before, and so I worked as a ski instructor at the Yellowstone Club, and then I just like had this time, and I just tried to find ways to fill it with things that I was really curious about. It didn't matter. Like I think at one point I was curious. I got really into cooking, which I had never been in, and I got crazy like into it, and people were like, "This is so good." So then I started like selling dinners at my house, which didn't last very long because the margins were super low, and I am not great with interacting with people every single night differently. So, But anything that I was like, okay, I don't care. I'm going to be super divergent. I'm not going to like knock things off the bat. I'm going to be like, okay, that's interesting. If that's curious, I'm just going to like dig a little bit into it and see if I flow with it or if I like hit a wall. So I started volunteering for a lot of things, doing random things. And I volunteered for TEDx. And so I helped organize that for a couple of years. And someone there said, oh, you should volunteer for this other conference. It's an entrepreneur conference up in Big Sky. And I said, okay, that sounds cool. So I volunteered there, and there was a film composer, Philip Shepard, who was giving a talk on like what he does, and he loves what he does. Like you could tell, like his passion and his reason for being is creating music, and you can tell it's his purpose, right? He knows that's his flow state, and the way he talks about it, it was like very like I was hungry for finding my own flow state, so I was like, okay, this person found their flow state. Like let me just be around this kind of energy. And so I did not have a music background, and I just kind of talked to him and I said, hey, like if you ever need help for anything, I don't know what I could possibly be helpful in, but if you ever do, like please let me know. I'm happy to help. And at the time he was looking for someone to manage more of the business operations because he wanted to focus more on his creative side, like doing the actual musical scores. And having the background that I had at the law firm, I was a finance lawyer. I was like, dude, walk in the park. Like, absolutely. So we just started working together like that. And we did film and video game scores for Netflix, for HBO. We did a video game score for video game for Sony. And so that's how we kind of worked together. And he had the idea of, it takes a really long time to make a score for a film or for a video game, like a really long time. And then the output you get of it when you go to the studio for a couple of days is 90 minutes of music, but you've been working on this thing for like a year and a half. It's pretty crazy, like the amount of effort for the amount of like output. And it's very, very time consuming. And so he says, it would be so cool if we could just score someone's life in real time, if we could provide music that can kind of be an accompaniment to someone's life as they go. And I said, that's a really cool idea. There's a lot of efficiencies of scale here that could happen. I see that there's a lot of pain points. So we started with it's myself and Philip and another investor from the UK, the three of us. And they're just, I think 2016, 2017. And then Tom Gruber, who's the co-inventor of Siri, he was at another conference that we met. And so now it's the four of us. And so that's the company for a while. We're just, trying different prototypes, making all kinds of things to see what's stuck. And we incubated at Abbey Road, which has an incubator for music innovation. And so we had a lot of contacts through there, and they kind of helped us kind of identify like where we might want to go. We raised a round of financing, a seed round of financing with friends and family. And that's kind of when we were able to first hire like a team. And that was back in 2019. And so from there, we've kind of grown into areas of, we work with Bentley to do a prototype for their cars to soundtrack in real time. We're working with Audi to do the same thing on a production scale level. We soundtracked the TV show for an original work for Twitch, where we soundtrack the show in real time based off of the audience feedback. So we read the feedback, the chat in real time, and based on the sentiment of the crowd, the music would change based on how they were responding. So if they were like really sad that someone died in a scene, the music would transition to be really sad. And so it was kind of these like ephemeral scores that could happen in real time. So that's kind of where we initially started. We started with just creating adaptive music. Since then, we've raised another round, quite a large round of financing. We really grew out the team. Now we're 30 people, and we focus on, our mission is to be the generative music platform, embracing AI for the benefit of artists. We think that, there's no shortage of human creativity, but there are areas where it can be augmented and help us scale in areas that we can't scale. So where humans aren't great at, like that's where we think technology should step in and provide just people with more opportunities and they previously would not have even considered. We really focus on like a human composer team. So we have a full team of human composers, people composers, and they create our initial building blocks of music. We have a technical team that creates the algorithms and the models that create the outputs of music. And so that's kind of what we do now. We create long form plays of music that you can hear on our website. We are working with artists to kind of reimagine their existing work and provide them with lots of new remixes or areas that they may not have previously been, like doing 8-hour sleep albums instead of just having a fixed track. And so we're able to extend music and things like that to help artists engage with their audiences in new ways and to help audiences engage with their artists in new ways.
I think that's brilliant. And I like what you said about the balance between the people and AI, and not replacing people, but finding, where are shortcomings? How do we fix these things? What can we do to make everything gel together? It's a very exciting concept. And, if I can, I'll direct everybody to go and have a listen on your website. Like I said, I was having a little bit of a listen before we jumped into this, and I must say it was a strange sensation at first, reading what was going on, understanding that you have people who are recording these sounds, and then you have a machine that's putting this together and composing this music. And it was a very strange thing. My experiences with AI are limited to ChatGPT and Siri. When I speak to her and she adds things to my shopping list, I'm like, hey, AI, it's great. And this is a whole new direction that you're going in, and I think it's incredible. What is in the future of Live Score? I know the company, it can only go in one direction from what I've heard, but for you, for your idea, your passion, your dream for the company, where do you want to see it in the next few years?
I think, for us, we're really hoping that we becomes kind of like a white hat in the sense of like AI for music. I think that there's always a lot of resistance to change and evolutions in music. And, from the vinyl to the cassette to the CD, big resistance to streaming, which was, a large evolutionary leap in music. And I think AI is going to have the same challenges every time there is that leap. But I think being on the right side of the artist is going to be really important, and kind of having that voice and saying that, that's where we believe it should sit. We believe like artists should retain their work. They shouldn't be felt like their work's being taken and trained on models, or that they're losing their control of their pieces that they've like so lovingly put together. And being on that side of it and kind of being the voice and advocate for that, I think is really important, especially as it kind of grows in the industry. I really hope that at some point, almost any artist can say, hey, I have this huge catalog of work, or I would really love for a way to extend my catalog and give me new ways to create revenue. It's hard being a musician. And I really hope that there's also going to be, companies and industries that say, wow, having the ability to have music that's been created by artists, by humans, and have it play out in instances that might not have been normally possible today is really unique and interesting. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how it does roll out and does play out. We all have our assumptions of what's going to happen, but we always have to listen to the market and the needs of everyone. And, every day I get a reaction and someone's like, well, what if it did this? And I'm like, good point. Like, I'll think about that. Maybe it should do that. And so you can't be so fixed on your goal. You can't be so fixed on your vision. I think it's true. Like, you have to have a vision. You have to have a North Star, but you have to be willing to like kill your darlings and listen to people and understand that everything you create is for somebody else. It's not for you, right?
That's it. Very interesting stuff. I think it's fantastic. Still struggle to wrap my head around how everything works, but it works and it seems to work well. So I'm going to leave all this smart stuff to you lot. And then I want to touch on Women of Winter. It sounds to me like this is a project that's also pretty close to your heart. From what I've seen, it looks like it's going well. I know you started off with the skiing and you started training some people and getting equipping people with the skills and things that they need to succeed in a new area of their lives. You can explain it better. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, Women of Winter. Like I told you, I had done TED Talks before. So once I had started, I'd seen how that's done. I'm like, oh, it's not so hard to put together. Kind of like an evening, prep a speaker, get them to really craft a story, kind of like a hero's journey. So the first iteration of Women of Winter is actually pretty funny. I'm in my locker room, and on one side of me is Francesca Pavillard-Kane. She used to compete on the Freeride World Tour. I think she's like one of the top 3 athletes in the world at one point. And she's like, oh, I was like, what'd you do this summer? And she's like, oh, I just came back from Chile. I was filming it with Warren Miller. I'm like, oh, that's crazy. There's not many women in Warren Miller films. It's like a big ski film company, and there's just not a lot of women in general in ski films. But back then it was like very rare, especially for a big feature film like that. And I said, that's crazy. And then next, like, couple minutes later, the girl on my left side, her name's Carly Jo Haugen. She's this incredible artist, just incredible artist. And I'm like, oh, what did you do? She's like, oh, I was like doing an art show in Denver. Like, I've been doing these top sheets for Icelandic, which is a ski brand. And I was like, that's so cool. And I'm like, you know what? People like should hear your stories. I don't understand why I'm the only one that kind of really knows what's going on, especially in our little community of Bozeman. You know, I was, like I told you, I was really hungry growing up I followed a path that was shown to me because I didn't really realize there were other paths in life. And I kind of wish growing up, I had heard from other people pursuing their dreams and having it be viable and having it not necessarily be so cookie cutter. And so I really wanted to share that with our community and with the young people in our community, because I had wished I had had that when I was young. And so I was like, all right, cool. Like, I'll raise like a little bit of money and we'll do like a wine and cheese night, and I'll coach you guys on your story of how we're going to do your talk and everything. So that's all because like from experience of doing TEDx. And so I like raised like, I don't know, like $1,000. And we got like really nice wine and really great charcuterie platters. And we put together this little show at this wine bar. And we're like, man, I hope more than our friends come. And the whole thing like absolutely was packed. It was wild. So the next year comes around and we're like, I don't know, I'm just doing winter. And then people are like, when's Women of Winter? I was like, what? What are you talking about? They're like, when's Women of Winter? I'm like, I had no intention of like rolling this thing over. That was just like a fun little hobby to do last winter, like nothing crazy. And so because so many people asked for it, and I think that's the important thing, right? It's like, you kind of got to hear what the market's saying. And if you think you can provide that solution better than anyone else, like jump at it. And so like hearing all this feedback for how much they love that talk and how there's just not a lot of it out there, and they were so hungry, we were like, all right, let's do this again. So we did it again that year. And I think for me, it was kind of like, you can get inspiration kind of anywhere. You can get it on the internet, you can get it like on Instagram, but it's one thing to go from like to drive inspiration to action. And that's really where I wanted things to start moving. So that's when we started our first education scholarships. And at the time I was kind of just looking around being like, okay, where don't you see a lot of women like driving or being leaders in the industry? And so at that time I was on like a chairlift with one of our ski patrollers, and I was like, oh, would you do this summer? And she says, oh, I went to National Avalanche School. I'm like, that's so cool. She's like, yeah, but I was like the only female there. I'm like, that is crazy. So then that's when we decided, okay, I'll raise some money to give a scholarship, like to give funding to send another woman patroller to National Avalanche School. And let's also raise some money to provide for an Avalanche 1 course, which is like your basic introduction course to backcountry skiing. Because there's not a lot of women in backcountry skiing, either as guides or whatever. And you hear a lot of stories of people just kind of following beta of their partners, which can be really dangerous. You're not making decisions of your own life. And so I think it's really important you are informed when making really important life decisions for yourself. So that's the first scholarship. The first scholarships were Avalanche 1 scholarships for 8 women, all in one group. We wanted to create community. We knew that was important. And for a female patroller to go to National Avalanche School, just to tip the meter a little bit more in our favor. So that was the first year and of education scholarships. Because for me, I think we're coming back in like full circle of stories, right? Like, education for me is really important. The reason it's important is it gives you authority to speak, and it gives you a place and foundation to stand on where someone can't really take that back from you and say, yeah, I don't think so. And you're like, no, I absolutely know so. So when you have that place where you can stand firmly in your decision making, you become a much more powerful version of yourself. And the more you learn, the more you do that, the more experience you gain, the better you are at advocating for yourself and for what you want and for others at some point. You know, when you're able to then expand outside of yourself and look externally, I think that's truly an area of like enlightenment that's like you want to try to achieve to at some point. So that's why education has always been really important. And so then the next year was COVID, and I love the in-person Women of Winter so much because the audience can go right up to the speakers. There's no like barrier of like, oh no, they're like too cool, you can't talk to them. You can talk right to the speakers. And so when COVID happened, I was like, you know, guys, I told my team of volunteers, I was like, I don't think I'm going to do it this year. Like, it's just not there for me. I love the in-person. I don't want to do it if it's not in person. And then every single one of them was like, no, we have to do this. We have to figure out a way. It's really important what we're sharing. And I was like, I'll think about it. And at the time I was reading this book, Women Who Were like, I forget what it's called, Girls Who Run the World, 31 CEOs Who Mean Business. And in the book, there's this woman, Stephanie Lampkin, and she is, she's a Black woman. She's a CEO of a data analytics company, and she has like a MIT 40 under 40, like Forbes 30 under 30, you name it, she had it. But she also has like a huge love for backcountry skiing. And I was like, that's crazy. What a cool thing. And I was like, oh my God. And the fact that I'm saying, like, I'm reading a book being like, that's crazy is evidence enough that it's ridiculous that there's not as many women of color in the field. And then around the same time, everything about race kind of blew up in America. We all finally had to face our own demons because we couldn't go out. We couldn't go to restaurants. We couldn't kind of just like check out and figure out what's going on. And so America was really, really like looking in and being internal about its own history and its own past. And for me, when I'm looking at doing Women of Winter, I was like, you guys, we need to do something that speaks to the issues at hand, that speaks to the issues that people care about. We can't just be making more noise. And so it was like, how do we move the needle on what's going on? How do we move the needle on the pain that's being felt and exposed and addressed? And how do we do something about it? And so at that point, it was like, okay, I can't change the world, but I can change the world that I live in. And I think when you kind of make that kind of more myopic, singular focus, instead of being like, I can't solve climate change. Well, of course you can't, but maybe you can solve like what you do. And so when we thought about it that way, it's like, okay, well, there's not a lot of women in snow sports that are women of color. Let's change that. Let's push the needle that way. And so I was like, all right, I'll give a clinic for women of color. We had done clinics before, like, or just, ski with us clinics. And I had multiple instructors come with me. Just a lot to manage a group if you're just one person. So I was like, I talked to folks in the area, other ski instructors, like ski school people. And I was like, all right, can I get like one more person who kind of looks like me to help me lead this clinic? Like, it's going to be hard for me to do it all alone. And they're like, there's no one else. I'm like, what? Like, you're telling me there's no one else in all of the ski schools in this area around Montana who can come in and help me? And they're like, there is nobody else. And that's when it was like, all right, well, we're just going to fucking change that, aren't we? And so
that's when the penny dropped.
That's when we were like, all right, we're going to do a scholarship for women of color. We're going to create a community, an environment where they feel safe to come in, learn and make mistakes, and advance them in areas of leadership in snow sports. And so that's when the first BIPOC scholarships for women in snow sports education started. And now we're on this is our 4th year. Oh my God, our 4th year doing it. Last year we had given over 100 scholarships. So now we're giving another 36 this year minimum, and then another 8 Abby ones. So I think we're almost plus a couple. So we do have 50 scholarships a year now, which is kind of crazy. We have great sponsors like Rosignol and Hestra and Giro that really like step up to the plate, put their money where their mouth is. And so it's been a crazy initiative. And a lot of the women that have gone through the program have come in and volunteered back, which has been amazing. One of our very first scholarship recipients is now our executive director.
Wow.
Kind of things we're talking about, like zone of genius, zone of greatness. I could do it. I could run Women of Winter like I had been, but it's not my zone of genius. And that's hers. And she wanted to do it and she loved it. And it's kind of like step back, serve at the best interest of your community, and be willing to like, see what is most necessary for everyone. And so I'm really glad for that. She's the best, Carolyn. So she's our new exec director. But yeah, so in a nutshell, like that's Women of Winter.
That's cool. So I think that's very special that you came back. And you mentioned that a lot of people are coming back to the project, and they wouldn't do that unless there was something that was pulling them back and they felt like there was a connection with what you were doing.
Yeah.
When we leave high school, we're like, goodbye, and never go back. And
I know. And I think that was like another one where I call it the market, but like the people, the community said that to me. So we did our first scholarship year. Then the second year, that whole group said, hey, we want to come back and throw a graduation party for the new class. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? So I was like, you guys want to pay your money to come back to Big Sky and throw a party for these people? They're like, yeah, we wished we had a party. And I'm like, oh my God. So that's when we knew we had a thing. So then we're like, well, if you're coming back, we'll do advanced education. So now we do, advanced ski education, just like to help them get to the next level in their skiing. We had over 12 come back last year, and we created a program where returning alumni can take either their freestyle or their children's specialist level 1 and get additional education training outside of the initial training. So it's just kind of feeding into the system more and more. And we're always looking for partners that, are kind of advancing the same mission as we are. We're working, with all sorts of folks that we can't solve the whole thing by ourselves. And we want to find folks that also are interested in working with us, hence like Rosignol and other brands that are just really want to drive the initiative. It's important to lift everyone up. There's other organizations like Edge, who's a big one out in the West Coast that is doing huge movements and driving diversity in snow sports. And there's just a lot of them. And it's really important that we just like all work together and like be a part of a big movement and change, because it's tough to do when you're just kind of working in isolation.
It seems to be a common theme, that's a recurring theme tonight. You've spoken quite in depth of the people around you, and you've said that a lot, the team, the people around you, giving back to the community. And it's funny because you also didn't serve food out of your house for very long because you didn't like to socialize with the people. So you have what it sounds to me like is that you have a specific way of interacting with people, and it can't be just plain. It has to be for good. It has to be something where somebody's learning or gaining something that you're inspired to do, or you're inspiring someone to do something, inspiring somebody to start something. Then you don't mind. But as long as you're not forced into socializing.
I'm the worst networker. I'm terrible at small talk. I'm really weird. I get really awkward. I don't even know what to do. Like, I can't small talk. I'm so bad at it. I really do like having like intentional conversations with people though. But small talk, like, I'd be a terrible salesperson. I'd be a terrible person to like send out there and like hit the road. But if we have like a shared vision, mission, like, what are we gonna do? Like, let's change some things. Let's figure it out. Like, I'm always down for conversations like that. But if it's just a chat, I am such a weirdo. You probably wouldn't even want to chat with me. You'd be like, she's such a strange bird.
No, nice. Well, look, I'm glad that I got to speak to you under these conditions. So, we were put in this place together. So I got to hear all of this from you. Before I let you go though, because I know you've got things to do today, do you have any final words of encouragement for our viewers? If there's one thing you can tell anybody that's standing there on the starting block, looking up, they're ready to go, they got to put that first foot forward, what do you say to them?
My thing is, like, no matter what you're doing in the moment, it might be like me collecting trash at a volunteer event or teaching skiing or running a company. At that moment in time, like, give your 110%, because there's always something to learn and someone will always see it, or you'll see something in yourself. And life is not linear, Life has so many ups and valleys. And if you are willing to take the time to learn the lessons within each and every one of them, somehow they will connect, they will come full circle. But never take for granted the lesson in every single day.
That's beautiful. Chris, I want to say thank you from myself and on behalf of Timmy. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, happy to do
It's been incredible listening to your story. And, if anything, I personally feel like I just have more ability now to do more things from listening to you. So thank you for the inspiration. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I wish you the best in all your walks, through the classes, through Life Score, into Women of Winter. I'm sure we're going to hear more about you. We're going to see the articles, and I'm sure you're going to do great things.
Thanks so much, Matt. I appreciate the time.
Awesome. So we'll see you later, Chris.